Migrating to Australia, the podcast.
I like the definite article. I like the definite article, Grant. The podcast.
Well, if you're into migration, and I know everyone is. I mean, when you finish looking at your Taylor Swift YouTube clips, you just move on in the playlist to David and Grant doing Migrating to Australia. That's the way it would run. No, really, at the moment, if you are a temporary resident of Australia or you have plans to come here, it's pretty important stuff that we're talking about. I am always joined by the handsome man that, if you happen to look, the handsome Mr. David Bongiorno, immigration lawyer extraordinaire, migration agent, principal at David Bongiorno and Associates. There we go. I'm very formal today, Dave. How are you?
I'm too scared to overtalk.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we've got a good session today because we're going to look at international students. International students are in the news all the time for good reasons and unfortunate reasons for them. It's a bit difficult at the moment to study. Everybody's online, but earlier this week, or yesterday actually, we had a bit of good news for international students, Grant.
Now, I just need to say, David, if it's Bandy, is that what his name was? If he's listening, I'm sorry, we're talking about international students again because that's important.
It is important. They contribute a great amount in many ways. Bandy, that's right. No, he said we talk too much about partner visas.
Yeah, we always talked about the same stuff, he said.
Well, international students are important because it's very tough for them at the moment to study here, but potential light at the tunnel when we reach stage 3, level 3.
The Prime Minister did make an announcement, but it's one of those announcements, and he's made a lot of them lately. It's been very common in this lockdown phase that something gets announced, but it's only an announcement of something that might happen.
An intention.
Yeah.
Whether the intention's realised.
Well, I'm just going to say, David, why don't you tell us what the intention is?
To open the doors to international students, an exemption, and make them exempt from the ban, from the entry ban. We've got Pacific Islanders, international students. The Prime Minister wants them to be able to travel to Australia when appropriate according to state and territories as well. There needs to be mutual agreement.
And that's the thing that people who aren't that familiar with Australia and how it's governed need to be aware that for movement of people around the country and for things like the health regulations, and this is where the lockdown powers and all that come from, and quarantining and everything, they're governed by the states. So the states have slightly different terms of lockdown and social distancing and what businesses are open. So as they open up, the conditions will be slightly different. So if you're intending to study in Perth or returning to Perth, it will probably be different than if you are coming to Melbourne.
Be a lot slower in Melbourne, a lot slower.
Perth is further along the curve or the progression of the recovery from the virus, shall we say, than Melbourne is. So Melbourne may be a couple of weeks behind some of the other states. So, summing that up, David, what we're saying is that it looks like semester 2 for July or August, international students might be readmitted to
Wouldn't
Australia.
it be lovely? Wouldn't it be lovely? The moment we hear anything concrete, we'll be on the podcast to talk about it. It's something that we can all hope, cross our fingers and toes for.
And that's what we're all working towards. So, well, actually, I'm not doing anything at all about it, but that's what I would love.
You're doing
to
your
see
bit.
happen.
You're staying at home. We're all doing our bit, staying at home.
But we haven't been invited along to National Cabinet to have our 2 cents worth, Dave. So, when they come calling, and when the Minister for Immigration and the Minister for Education give us a ring, I'll take the call.
That's it. We'll conference them now. I mean, at the moment, international students are pretty much, universities, we've done podcasts on some of the universities and private colleges and what they're doing to help their students. The expectation at federal level basically is this: the government's saying if you're a first-year student, you've made a declaration that you have sufficient funds to support yourself for 12 months. If you are a second-year student, third-year student, you can have access to your superannuation for up to 10 grand. Now, if a student's been in Australia for at least 2 years, they may well have at least 10 grand superannuation if they've been paid on the books. People who that's the thing. We've had a bit of a chat in past podcasts about being paid on the books. We won't go into it today, but always be paid on the books. Now, some people lost their right to excess work this past week. Remember how international students who are already working in supermarkets stacking shelves, up until the 1st of May, they could work more than 40 hours per fortnight when school was in session. Now we are 9th of May. They are back to regular 40 hours per fortnight while school's in session. People who don't have to worry about 40 hours per week while school's in session, who have unlimited work rights, can work more than 40 hours per fortnight, are people employed in the health sector, people enrolled in health-related courses. So nurses and doctors, or nurses in particular, they can do their thing to fight COVID-19. People who are employed in aged care, very noble to work in aged care. People who are employed in aged care by an approved provider or Commonwealth-funded aged care service provider can work more than 40 hours per fortnight. This is all linked to COVID.
Right. Now, I'm just going to stop right now, David, and say we've been forgetting this.
We have? What's that?
The information contained within this podcast
is of a general nature.
And
if you rely on
not be relied on as specific advice, because what we're talking about is general principles.
And we are. And I mean, immigration is case specific. So when we talk one-on-one, we look at age, the applicant, gender of the applicant, qualification of the applicant, health of the applicant, work the applicant has done. Every case, immigration law is not governed by precedent, not governed by precedent at all. Each case is assessed on its own merits.
And if you do rely on the information within this podcast as specific advice and take action based on of the information given in this podcast, what are you, David?
You're a galah.
Yes, good. Had to get that one in because I want to drop the sound clip in.
The thing is, university students will have visas not necessarily expiring now, 9th of May. They'll have visas expiring end of August, or if they're finishing at Christmas time, the middle of March. But if people in the private sector have student visas expiring shortly, they need to apply for a new student visa if they haven't finished their course, or a tourist visa if they want to stay here. COVID-19 slows down visa processing. We've had visas approved this week in various subclasses, so they're still processing. What people mustn't do, Grant, they mustn't let their visas lapse. They mustn't become unlawful. Hold a visa, golden rule of Migrating to Australia podcast. Hold a visa, if eligible, apply for a new visa while holding visa.
Now, I have noticed that you've been very active on your social channels, David, on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter, always pointing that out. Every morning you seem to be saying, your visa is expiring, make sure you apply for an extension. Or
apply for a new visa.
Not for an extension, a new visa. Let's
Absolutely.
get that right.
It's tragic when people forget their expiry dates. It's a tragedy. It should be second only to your birthday. Now, you and I don't want to remember our birthdays, but we do.
I was recently 21 again.
They put a man on the moon when I was born, so we're all getting on. But the story is, if you forget your visa expiry date and become unlawful, it creates more problems than it's worth. So hold a visa, lodge a visa if you're eligible. If you're not eligible, leave the country. Don't become unlawful.
Well, we've been talking about international students, the ones who are here, and today we've broadened that out to be talking about international students, the ones who are hoping to come back for semester 2. But we're going to talk about a specific visa today that is for students who are here. But
and finishing their courses.
They're finishing up. This is about what they have to do. Now, we have covered the 485 visa before, but there's a few things that are just a little bit different, aren't there, David?
There are. We haven't done it for a little while now. And the story, there's always got to remember, and those who've heard the podcast before will remember there's two streams. Now, the 485 is a graduate visa. It's almost like, in inverted commas, a reward visa for successfully completing your course. Not every course renders you eligible. That's very important to remember. What is also important to remember, there are two streams. There's the graduate work stream and the post-study work stream. Now, it's a one-off visa. When you're a primary applicant, you can have one bite alone. You've got to make it while you're in Australia. You've got to receive it while you're in Australia. Not that anybody's going to be leaving to go offshore in a hurry in this climate, because once you leave as a temporary resident, ciao. So basically, it's very...
You have mentioned before that there's that problem where people graduate at the end of year. And then they go back to celebrate.
For Chinese New Year, Vietnamese New Year. with COVID, I wouldn't be going back to celebrate Chinese New Year or Vietnamese New Year if we still have this issue at the end of the year. I would be staying here. If you're already here, stay here just in case there is a second or third wave. Got to be risk averse. And it's very important when you're finishing your course, if you're eligible and if you want to stay, that you get a lot of things done between you finishing the course and your visa expiring. You finish your course for migration purposes when you have your letter of completion, your academic transcript, your letter of completion stating your name, how long you studied, that it was in English, that it was in Australia, and your transcript, your subjects, proof of passing, failing, credits, high distinctions, etc. The testimonial, if you have it, that's great, but the testimonial itself is not essential to make application for migration.
Do you find many people get that, not confused, but they're under the misapprehension that the testimonial will suffice?
The testimonial is not correct because it's often, some schools offer half every 6 months or every quarter graduation. So the people would find themselves in a lot of strife if they relied upon their testimonial. It's not required. It's not required, but some schools will tie it all up in one go. You finish your course in November, you get your academic transcript, your letter of completion, 3 weeks later you graduate. Well, if you've got a visa that finishes in March, then you can use your degree as well. But the key documents are the academic transcript and the letter of completion, because they will make clear to the reader, the assessor, that you've studied in Australia, you've done your 4 semesters or 6 semesters, whatever you've done, your full course, and it's completed in Australia in English. People who rely on the degree, well, they can't, because it all depends on when your course finishes and when your ceremony is. If your ceremony is within your visa period, you can throw your degree up, but if it's not, it doesn't matter. Letter of completion, academic transcript. The two streams to the visa, the graduate work stream and the post-study work stream, and what they are, one is 18 months and one is 24 months. Now, people who are applying for 485s, subject to their eligibility, of course, should be looking to do the 24-month one, buys them more time in Australia.
And which one is the 24-month one, David?
That's the post-study work stream. When you look at them, there's the graduate work stream and the post-study work stream. The graduate work stream is 18 months. The post-study work stream is 24 months.
Why would somebody go for the 18-month one?
That applied for and received their first student visa before 5 November 2011. So if somebody studied secondary school here, they might be in that category, or probably mathematically now not. 2-3 years ago, there were still a few people left. If you applied for and received your first student visa before 5 November 2011, you can't apply for the 2-year visa. You can't apply for the post-study workstream visa. You're ineligible.
So just by the weight of numbers, there's probably very few people that is going to apply.
Now, absolutely, unless people have done primary, secondary school here, given the average age of a graduating student. The 2 visas, I mean, we touch on it so people know it exists. But if you've applied, if you're listening or you're coming to study and you're listening and you're applying for your student visa now and you're getting it now, you look to do the 2-year 485 visa so long as you're eligible. It's prescriptive law. Immigration is prescriptive law, and people get themselves in trouble when they do their applications and miss the steps. It's like a dance. Do A to Z, get outcome. Miss L5, P7, Q2, and then ciao, you're gone. And it's not as easy as it looks. What a lot of people make mistakes in doing, they forget their police checks. They forget to have adequate health insurance, or they lodge too early. Now, that's a really odd one. They actually lodge before they've got their academic transcript and letter of completion. And their academic transcript and letter of completion show they graduated on Y date, but they've lodged an application attesting on that application that they finished on X date. Does that make sense?
It does. And I guess that's probably the most common error that you would see, because people are very keen to make their plans for the next phase of their life as soon as uni's done and they know they've been successful.
And what happens, what the component that makes it even more brutal than it should be, is they don't get a refusal till April, usually. So what that means is their visa is expired. But their visa's expired. So they're in a bit of a bind then, and it creates new problems because they don't hold a valid visa.
So then they're either going to potentially be in detention or have to apply offshore.
They apply offshore, very unlikely that they're going to get back on a tourist visa, but they can. It has been done. We can get people back, but you don't want to try it. There's discretion with the tourist visa that I can't remember if we've done a tourist visa. I think we have. I think we have. A while back,
you remember what the tourist visa is actually called?
The visitor visa.
No, it's the most dangerous visa.
Oh, it is. Oh, good Lord, it is. I mean, people.
You're saying.
It is. I know. I've only had 3 espressos this morning, not 5. Basically, what happens is this. If you lodge before you've got your academic transcript letter of completion, you've lodged too early, you'll get rejected. And people don't know that till they get the rejection email. It's prescriptive. If you do little things, if you miss little things. I mean, one of the big ones, Grant, imagine telling your mum and dad, if they're, you're a student from, say, Hong Kong, ring up mum and dad and say, oh, look, I've just had my 485 post-study work right visa rejected because I didn't apply for an Australian Federal Police check. You can apply online. You can apply online.
What's the sort of timeline that a student should look at following? They're finishing in November.
So their visa will expire generally. Generally, people who get their academic results, finish their course at the end of the year, be it November, December, will generally have their visa expire March 15 the following year. So they've got effectively 3 months, or just under, a little bit under.
I can't imagine that a police check is going to take 3 months.
You only need proof of application, and if you're timely and organised and don't go offshore for a holiday to see mum and dad, you can knock everything off in January, February, no problem. See, what happens is this: the danger with the Australian Federal Police check is you can appeal it, you can take it to review, but at review you'll be crushed because it's a time of application. You've got no proof you've applied. You'll be rejected. And so it buys people time, but it will end in disaster. The other one, and what you can do now, because they're processing, is front-end load with a medical. If you're enjoying good health, you've got to enjoy good health. You won't get a student visa if you don't enjoy good health. If you develop a complication or an issue, you may have issues progressing through the system. Depends upon the illness or the incapacity. But we will save that for another day. The story with the medical, get it done, because it takes 3 or 4 months to process, and then your visa's granted. When I say 3 or 4 months to process, if your visa expires March 15 and you lodge in February, you'll have your visa by April, May. It's good to have it on and running. You can't buy more than 3 months because they process in about 3 months, 4 months, tops. So you get 27, 28 months in Australia after you finish your course.
I'm correct in saying that even though the visa that you're currently on, which is a student visa, expires on 15th of March, provided you've got your application in plenty of time and you don't get your new visa until, let's say, May, as you just said.
Doesn't matter, because a bridging visa is created.
Bridging visa. Yeah, it's created with your application.
The act of lodgement creates a bridging visa A for Apple. March 16, if your visa expires March 15, March 16, you go into a bridging visa A. That gives you a lawful right to work here, live here, remain here until a visa is granted.
Okay, well, let's have a
The health insurance, let's touch on the other one. That's the other one. Every student who's here has overseas student healthcare cover. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't have a visa. What they need to take out is health insurance for their 485. That's compulsory. And basically, a 6-7 minute phone call to Bupa or Allianz or Alliance, however you say it here. And that is another one that people fall down upon. They don't have health insurance.
Most of the major companies can offer appropriate insurance for
absolutely. I mean, the common ones are Bupa and Allianz. They're the biggest, and it's really easy. I helped someone who was a bit shy, and it took 6 minutes with me on the phone and them on the phone to get health insurance in place for the 485 visa. Doesn't take long at all. Now, the post-study work stream, it's essentially, once again, if you're coming late to the podcast, you've applied for and received your first student visa after 5 November 2011, which would literally apply to all now, I think. It's your ideal visa. You've got to be eligible for it, and it's the one to buy you time to stay in Australia to decide what you want to do. Do you want to be on the pathway to permanent residency? Are you eligible for the pathway to permanent residency? Do you want to seek partner visa? It gives you time to, after the rigours of study, have a rest, lie on a beach, prepare for more migration if you wish. Now, you've got to have completed a bachelor's to be eligible, or bachelor's honours, master's extended degree, a doctorate. Granted, if you do a doctorate, you get 4 years. Not bad, is it? You get 24 months if you do a bachelor's or a master's. You get 48 months if you do a doctorate. Okay. 485 is the opportunity to prepare for permanent residency. Most people who've come here to study don't only want an Australian education, of course, premium Australian education, but they also want an opportunity to apply for permanent residency. Permanent residency, independent permanent residency, can be very daunting in this world. It's a score-based system, and we'll go through it today. Basically, permanent residency, you need, at the moment, there's another round in 2 days. At the moment, you need 95 points. Later on in the podcast, we'll go through what constitute the categories to get your 95 points. They're essentially age, your level of English, your degree studied here or overseas, your degree studied here, time spent studying in Australia, and your Australian work and your overseas work experience. They're the basic categories on which you build your 95 points.
And if you're interested in the dilemma with the 95 points, I could point listeners back to the episode, which I think is entitled, "If You're Thinking of Studying Accounting for Permanent Residency or Smoking Weed, Don't." And then the other one, which was childcare.
Yeah.
That don't study childcare for permanent residency.
Yeah, we paused this podcast to say, do not study accounting. Christ had come off the cross. He couldn't get it. It's that hard.
If you're interested, we've done a deep dive of how the points work. So really we can skip over it, David, that depending on your age, where you studied, where your work experience was, the level of English that you have, whether you have community English
credential community
qualifications,
language,
which is translation. What else have we missed out?
Well, you got the big one. People often say, well, how come certain categories of age get more points than others? So if you're 25 to 32, you finished a bachelor's degree here or master's degree here, you're going to get 30 points towards those 95. 30 points. Now, if you're only 18 to 24, you get 25 points. You get 5 extra points.
And if you're as old as us, me or Methuselah,
we're too old. We're too old. Yeah. We're over 45. Just no. When you're over 45, it's all over. It's too old.
So age, there's your
age. The ideal age is 25 to 32. You get 30 points. English ability. Now, when we help people from the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, Canada, New Zealand, they feel rightly aggrieved that they've got to study.
Here's a comment, David. Can you say
Eddie
that?
Buck. Eddie Buck wants 80 points. I want 80 points.
No chance.
Well, if you want a 189 visa under current law, you need 95 points. If you're eligible for state nomination or territory nomination, Eddie, wherever you are, the points are good points, but we'd obviously need to assess where you are, what you're studying. But somebody who's got 80 points, it depends what your points are made up of as well, Eddie. If you've got 80 points, you might stand a chance, depending on your facts and circumstances, for state migration. We had a nurse the other day with 75 points, and she got Australian 190 visa for her state, no issues. She didn't have 95 points.
Now, the 190 visa, David, refresh everyone's memory.
State-sponsored, territory-sponsored.
And what are the rights that go with that?
Well, basically, you're making a commitment to a state or a territory, and under the law at the moment, the state or territory you study in will be the state or territory that you would look to migrate in. The 190 is also permanent residency. Permanent residency by 189 is incredibly hard to get. They only offered 50 invitations to people this month or last month, 2,000 odd the month before, 1,700 odd the month before. It shrunk because of COVID. Whether it jumps back in 2 days' time or not, I doubt very much, but it will get back. It will get back. 190 visa, the states or territories nominate you, and if you satisfy their criteria, you've got to make sure you do. It's worth consideration. The 491 visa is a new visa from November 2019, introduced on November 16. That is sitting up there with the 189 and 190. But if we take Victoria for an example, you've got to get a job in your occupation. Now, that's hard. That's easier said than done.
That's going to be even harder now with we're looking at double-digit unemployment in this current situation here. And there's going to be a lot of people very highly skilled with a lot of experience who have been working, and their companies will have just folded or downsized. It's going to be a very, very tough market to get.
It's also very important to point out, using Victoria as an example, you've got to get a job in Ballarat, Bendigo, Horsham, Moe, Shepparton, Mildura. It's not about metropolitan Melbourne. It's not about Melbourne. It's about getting a job in the bush, in the country, in the towns.
And as things shake out, that might be very, very difficult. David, just before we go back to talking about the 485, that's raised an interesting issue. Do you think that the government might use the backpacker visa as a way to get the labour that's required in the regions quickly, and that they might make some other pathways available from the backpacker?
Well, I think Category 3 exemptions will apply not only to international students, who are a very important part of the labour force, but also Pacific Islanders. In terms of backpackers, remains to be seen. I don't know about the working holiday visa and the working holiday visa number 2 or number 3 being that attractive to those applicants, because, why would you want to spend... Some people... Look, basically the working holiday visa is used to get a taste of another country, work in another country, and potentially use it as a stepping stone to some form of further temporary or permanent migration. If it involves going to the country, it's going to be a lot tougher to get any form of temporary or permanent employment in the country. So I don't know about whether the 417 and 462 visa holders will be sought as labour for the bush. They're certainly instrumental in the fire recovery, but it remains to be seen what happens with them. International students going to rural universities will be something that I would imagine rural towns and governments are keen to promote. And Pacific Islanders are a ready, willing and excellent labour force that come in seasonally to help in regional areas. So I think those two will definitely come back in stage 3. Whether or not 417 and 462 visa holders do remains to be seen.
And another opportunity for you to give an opinion, David, is, and actually it'd be really interesting to have Abul Rizvi back to...
Wasn't he great?
Talk about this. Do you reckon this will give as we come out the other side of COVID-19, and we don't know how long that will be.
No.
Do you think this will give the government an opportunity to shake up the immigration system and maybe reweight some of the categories?
It's very hard to know what they will and won't do. You often get the feeling a lot of it's made up on the run. A lot of it is being made up as it goes along in this scenario with COVID. Very hard to second guess them because they don't. Well, immigration law, implementation of immigration is not necessarily bound by precedent. They don't look at what visas have been successful and necessarily keep them on. It's after taxation law, the second most dynamic area of law in the country. So it's actually really hard to speculate as to what they will do. I mean, the 489 visa we had was an excellent visa, and they replaced it with a 491, which is almost, it's a brutal visa. The 489 was a great visa. The 491 they replaced, and it worked, but the 491 visa they've replaced it with is brutal. It defies logic. So, no, it's really hard to sort of anticipate what the government's next moves will be.
Let's get back to international students, recent graduates and the 485.
And I've got to have, age is the big one. English is massive. And you've got to have a test that's completed within 3 years. When you lodge your application, you've got to have completed your test within the 3 years prior. 3 years, 1 day, not valid. You've got to have done it within at least 3 years of applying. 7s in each band, 8s in each band. 7s in each band for reading, writing, listening, speaking. IELTS will get you 10 points. 8 for reading, 8 for writing, 8 for listening, 8 for speaking will get you 20 points. With PTE, the Pearson test academic, the perception is it's an easier test, Grant. Easier test. Now, that's anecdotally, every student I've asked prefers, or most 9 out of 10 prefer PTE because it's easier. The perception is it's easier. It is PTE academic. It mustn't be confused with IELTS academic. IELTS has a general stream and IELTS has an academic stream. IELTS academic, IELTS general can be used for migration purposes. Remember, it's got to be a fresh test, have done within the 3 years before you apply. If you did it 4 years before you apply, it's not a valid test. You'll lose. If you did the test a year ago, it's valid before you...
So as a general rule, if you've done IELTS to apply for your initial student visa,
it'll typically be too late, too old.
A degree, it's going to be too late.
It'll be too old, that's right. Basically, I say to people, you finish in November, your visa expires in March, go do a test in December.
Unless you got the maximum points on your IELTS before you started your bachelor's, you're going to get an opportunity to pick up a higher score and points.
Correct. The thing is this, a lot of people who might have got 6s when they applied to do their bachelor's or their master's will be 7s or 8s. So to rely on an old test that potentially is not a true reflection of what you possess, your talent in reading, writing, listening, and speaking, it's crazy not to do the test again. When I do talks at campuses or talk to students individually, I ask them, when did you do your test? And they say, we did it on X date. I said, well, on my date when you finish your course, your test will be older than 3 years of age, and that means you need to do a new test. Be cautious, be conservative, do a new test anyway, because your results will be better. The key, I mean, I repeat it ad infinitum. If your test was taken within 3 years of you applying for your 485, you're safe. If it was taken within 3 years and 1 day or more, you're not safe and you'll get rejected. You'll get rejected.
Yes,
IELTS, PTE, And OET is the other one for health professionals, occupational English test. There's TOEFL that Latin Americans and some Southeast Asian countries prefer over IELTS and PTE. Do IELTS when you're here in your second year of your bachelor's, or do IELTS or PTE in your final year of your master's. It's only $330. When you spend $100,000 on your education, $330 extra is not going to make much difference.
Yes, don't be like those guys who have crashed their Lamborghini on the freeway, or it's broken down, and they've spent $395,000 on the car, but they can't afford a tow truck.
Points towards the elusive 95 if you're going for a 189 visa, or anything above 65 if you're eligible for a 190 visa. Include your work inside Australia at a skilled level and your work outside Australia at a skilled level. If you're doing a bachelor's here and you've come from school in your home country, or if you're doing that, if you come from school to uni here, you're not skilled till you finish your degree. So if you're working in an IT department on a support desk while you do your bachelor's, that work doesn't count. It puts money in your pocket. Which is great. Yeah, everybody likes a bit of money in their pocket, but for points test purposes, no.
Yeah, for your PR, it's not the work that you...
no.
Does that mean, as a general rule, there's no work that you can be doing while you're studying for your degree?
Bachelor's level. But if you're at master's level, you can claim Australian work experience points because you're allowed to work 40 hours a fortnight when school's in session and more. If you do 20 hours per week every week, leave included, while you hold a master's and you're qualified from your bachelor's in your specific discipline, that counts for Australian work.
As Australian skilled work.
Correct. Australian work experience of 20 hours per work. Basic example, somebody's done an IT degree in their home country and is coming to do further studies at master's level. If they've got a qualification as a system analyst, business analyst, that work experience of 20 hours per week while they do their master's will count because they've got the bachelor's degree in it.
Even if they're handling inquiries on a...
No, they've got to be working. They've got to be working as system analyst or business analyst. They've got to be working in their occupation or closely related. Yeah. So basically, if you've got an accounting degree and you're doing a master's in accounting, for example, you cannot. If you're doing a master's in accounting here and you've already got a bachelor's in accounting from your home country, if you are doing accounts payable, accounts receivable, that doesn't count.
If you're working as a bookkeeper, that won't count.
Doesn't count.
But the accounting's a bad example because they won't get the points to get PR anyway.
Well, it's gone up. It's over 100 now. It's insane. So, don't study accounting. Don't study childcare. Skilled employment in Australia is very easy to demonstrate: pay slips, tax return, contract, reference letter, group certificate. If you're coming to do masters and you want to demonstrate your overseas work experience, you've got to get as much of similar material as possible. Labour contract if you're from Vietnam, for example. Insurance, proof of insurance if you're from Iran. A statement of service is insufficient because that could have been written by your uncle or your best friend. You need third-party evidence to support that you've been paid. Make sense?
It does. And do you get many people trying to pass off working in Uncle Jim's
Working in Uncle Jim's business is fine so long as you've got an occupation, so long as there's a relevant occupation on what's called the medium long-term strategic skill list, one. But two, you've got a qualification at bachelor's level minimum in your home country prior to claiming that work experience. Where people fall in trouble, where people can fall in trouble, in Latin America, a lot of students work full-time and study full-time and, balance incredible loads. And they might be a consultant at PwC, but they still haven't finished their bachelor's in business administration.
So none of that work counts towards that.
Not for overseas work experience because they're not skilled. Yet they're highly skilled because they've got 9 years working for one of the big four. That can be an issue. Points are divvied up. 10 points for a diploma, 15 points for a degree, 20 points for a doctorate. All right. Now, don't be like a client of mine some years ago who was a doctor who did his own application for migration, expressed interest and claimed 20 points as a doctor, and he claimed 20 points for doctorate. No. So we had to withdraw. When he came to me, they said, they want to see evidence of my doctorate. I said, well, do you have a doctorate in medicine? 2 years. He said, no. Yeah. I said, well, we'll have to let it lapse and we will apply again. So, a doctor has completing a minimum of 2 years of your degree in Australia to satisfy the Australian study requirement. Having your local lingo as a credential community language If you're from mainland China, maybe consider doing credential community language for 5 points. If you're from Hong Kong, Cantonese. If you're from Vietnam, Vietnamese. If you're from Italy, Italian. It gives you 5 bonus points. It's very hard. It's very hard. It's not easy. It's not guaranteed, but it's worth considering as a source for other points.
It's a big commitment to do.
It's a tough exam. It's a tough exam.
Course and do that. But
some people do the course. Some people do the course. You raise a good point, Grant. Some people do the course and then they get their points that way. But that's another $10,000, $12,000. Other students, other grads on their 485 will just do the exam, and that's quite expensive as well. But it's not $12,000. Yeah. If you've got a partner who you can demonstrate is a partner and an occupation on the list, you get extra partner skills, 10 points. Professional year is the other one.
Now, hold on, David. I know we've talked about this before, and this was an issue that I know when I was listening back when we talked about this the last time we covered the points. I didn't ask you, does the partner have to be pursuing the same visa?
Your partner will be on your application, and a spouse or a de facto partner, same sex or mixed sex.
But for instance, if they are, let's say, a doctor, but they're no longer practicing and have not practiced for years and have no intention of practicing again,
doesn't count.
Okay, so that was really the point of the question. If you're a dentist and your wife is a dentist,
dentist is off the list. Dentist is off the list.
Thank God that you pulled me up on that.
Too many dentists. Like lawyers, too many lawyers.
All right. Well, let's say you're a doctor and your wife is a civil engineer, and that's on the list. Yeah,
perfect. That'll work. That works. 10 points.
But she has decided that for 5 years she is raising children and is not applying for permanent migration here as a skilled engineer.
What happens then? She gets 5 points because she'll have the English. Then I get 10 points.
Yeah. So the extra points are only there if you're actively active in that career that you're qualified for. That is on the list.
Because you need a skill assessment. Yeah. And you wouldn't get a skill assessment if you haven't. It'd be because engineering is such a dynamic area.
Yeah. If you were out of it for more than 2 years, you
have some issues.
Get one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that was what it came to mind that I did have someone I knew who was going through the 485 process, and they didn't get the extra points for the skilled partner, even though their partner was highly skilled, but they were not active in the industry at the time.
When they're applying for the 189 or the 190, they don't get the points. Yeah. If somebody is, let's think about it, a teacher and their partner's an actuary, then they both have to have skill assessments. And you'd use the teacher. If you use the teacher gets 10 points if the person has a skill assessment and the occupation is on their list and they've got the English. Yeah. So you've got to have an occupation on the relevant list, the medium long-term strategic skill list for the 189. You've got to have English correct, which is easy, and you've got to have a positive skills assessment.
Yeah.
We do a lot of doctors out of medical school, and they'll partner up with their wife or their husband. And because they're going through the system together, that's a perfect example of how it works if you study. But if you're a couple who are here on work visas or you're overseas and you're both system analysts and you want to get the points of the partner who's the secondary partner, then they have to have a skill assessment, they have to have English, and they have to English is the key in that scenario. Does that make sense? You've got to have your occupation on the list. You've got to have a skill assessment. You've got to have English.
It does, but I like to go find out the ins and outs of a duck's bum. Do you have to both be in the same age range? If
you've got to be under 45. You've got to be under 45.
But there isn't a extra points if you're both in the same age range, and if the only points that count for the primary applicant's age, English, degree, time spent studying Australia, overseas work experience, Australian work experience. That's how we go toward the 95 points. Yeah.
The bonus points come from a skilled partner. And if the
skilled partner was 40 and the primary applicant was 34,
no,
there's no downside.
Nope, not at all.
Okay. That's all
not
I
at all.
wanted to clear up.
And the story is if the person who was the secondary applicant was a gun marketer, because marketing's not on the list, you only get 5 points for the English by doing the test.
Yeah.
Or if you have a UK partner who's a gun marketer, hypothetically, then the UK passport is enough for the 5 points. They don't have to spend $330 on an English test. It gets expensive. Immigration's expensive. And another thing that costs money is the professional year. It's 5 points, but it's $10,000 to $12,000. Now it's like a soft entry into the workforce where you do internships, learn about water cooler skills, coffee machine skills. Oh, Collingwood had a great game today. Wish Bucks was back coaching. Is he still coaching? I can't even remember.
Mate, he is, but is anyone coaching?
Well, the thing is this. The season, well, I don't know. We won't have a season. Professional years, accounting, engineering, and IT. And it's 12 months, or 40 odd weeks, and it's 10 or 12,000 bucks, and it's 5 points. If you're studying here on a 4.8 and you've got your 4.85, what you do is you do it on a Saturday or a Sunday while you do your work in your nominated occupation Monday to Friday. If you get a job Monday to Friday.
Oh, good luck.
There's a lot to do. People don't understand. Students make tremendous sacrifices to come here, and their parents, and they make financial sacrifices that people who live here and grow up here have no idea how much it costs. It's very expensive to study in this country, and I tip my hat to anybody who can get through the system. We help them get through the system. They've got to do some incredible things. They've really got to be excellent in English, foreign language, get a job, do an internship, get extra points. I mean, there's so much involved. What we have in the 189 is Mecca, Nirvana. That's where you can get independent migration, live in Darwin, live in Perth, work and live wherever you want. The 190 ties you to regions. The 491 ties you to regions within regions. And that's another reason, if you do a medical degree or a nursing degree, you might want some country experience, but you want to spend 3 years and a bit to be eligible for permanent residency in Bendigo, Ballarat or Melbourne. That's the question. No disrespect to Bendigo, Ballarat, but people come here, they come where there's opportunity, and the majority of opportunities in the city.
Well, prior to COVID. Who knows?
Prior to COVID, who knows? Who knows what it's going to be like afterwards? But I suspect it'll be even harder for people to get work in the bush than it already is. Points are everything, and people talk about their points. Points change too. One example where people can get extra points, we mentioned a little bit earlier. You come with nascent English, you do your 2-year masters or 3-year bachelors, your English is going to flourish. That's another reason why you do a test when you're here, not only to get a fresh test for your 485, but also more points for when you go for the expression of interest in the 189 or the 190.
And that's another reason why when you are here studying, you don't sit with all the people you have met who are from your home country and talk about everything that's going on in your home country and talk in your mother tongue.
No, it's always, look, you know what? You must expand your circle, and that's part of the experience of studying overseas, to meet people from different cultures. English is the method of instruction in universities and colleges in this country, and English, nothing wrong with getting an English tutor. Nothing wrong.
And what I always try and impress on people is that you can get the extra points by just being a little bit better.
Correct.
With your English skills.
Correct.
And the points are what it's all about. If you have come here with the idea that education is a pathway to permanent migration, every point you can grab is a nugget of gold.
And while you may not be getting points while you're studying your bachelor's or master's, if you're in your field, if you're the support desk at a business where you can later work as a system analyst, business analyst, push to climb the ladder. Because what you're going to have to do toward the end of your 485, if you want to stay, is express interest in migration for a 189, a 190, or a 491. Now, the expression of interest is free. It's data entry, an application to a computer. You're not dealing with people, you're dealing with computer. They'll calculate your age, they'll calculate your English, your education, your employment, your credential, community language. And you've got to answer these questions honestly, because if you don't, you'll get yourself in big trouble when you can't substantiate 95 points. The system says, we have you at 90. How do you have 95? I mean, this is where people get in trouble. With the doctor, we let it lapse and we applied again and we got it. But, who knows? When you get one EOI, you make it right, do it right, so you can apply without having to do another expression of interest.
Now, David, can I just stop you there? Because I know when we aren't describing each visa and we're talking about numbers, it can get confusing, because we're basically talking about the graduate visa,
the 485
with the postgraduate
work rights. There's the graduate work stream and the post-study work stream.
So that's the 485, but you did
That's
mention the 190.
that's state-sponsored,
That's
territory-sponsored.
nomination by a state or territory government. And
Beautiful, Grant. Spot on.
There's a 5-point bonus in terms of collecting your points for permanent
For the
migration.
190. For the 190.
If you get that. You also mentioned the 491.
You get 15 points.
Now, that's, again, nomination by state or territory government.
Or eligible family member.
Now, that gets 15 points, and that's different from the 491. How? Than the 190.
The 190 is permanent residency. You make a commitment to is provisional. If you spend in your 5 years at least 3 years in a day in a specific region, you're then eligible to apply for a 191. And a 191.
And I wasn't really fair on you there, David, because we've done 3 of the states already talking about 491.
We have.
And they have slightly different
requirements.
Yeah. But still, the obligation is pretty much the same, that you've got to be working full-time in the nominated
You can change after, but to get into the 491, you've got to have the job in the nominated occupation. If you segue into something else, another job, that's okay, as long as you're above the statutory minimum, 53.9. Now, that's the sting in the tail.
And the 53.9 is how much you're getting paid.
That's it, which is not an inconsiderable sum. And, Grant, you perhaps know better than me from your accounting background, somebody who's practicing as a baby accountant, graduate accountant in Bendigo versus somebody who's practicing as a baby accountant in Melbourne, there'll be a substantial difference in the salaries.
There may be, but look, I'm quite a few years out of it now, Dave, but as you know, there is a glut of accountants in the country, the same as if there's a glut of lawyers. And so if somebody really wants to get a job as an accountant and get a foothold, I would say at entry level, they would probably be being paid a lot less.
And therefore they won't satisfy the 491 requirements.
That's right.
So every visa has traps. That's why you must be so careful if you're acting alone. So immigration law is like conveyancing law. It's like tax law in this country. You can do your own conveyance if you purchase a property. You can do your own tax law if you lodge a tax return. If you mess them up, there's catastrophic consequences for conveyancing, tax, and immigration.
Now, before we go back onto the 485 final run, you also mentioned the 189. And what's the distinctions with
189 is independent migration. Independent. Live in Darwin, live in Brisbane. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want.
But it's still points-based, isn't it?
All points-based. The 485 leads to the 189, the 190, the 491.
So who could apply for a 189?
People who've got an occupation.
Okay, so that's the distinction I wanted to draw out, really. If you can't get your 90 points, 95 points, or 100 points, depending on your category, your employment category, or your occupation category, the 190 and the 491 are options for you.
Yeah, because you don't need 95 points for the 190. You don't need 95 points for the 491.
But that's because you've been selected by a state or territory government. So
satisfying their criteria and having 15 points.
Even though they're lower points, they do have a different kind of selection criteria.
They do. You're dealing with a state or a territory. Absolutely. Yeah. Dealing with a state or territory for the 190. The 491, I mean, it's really tough. People say...
Well, that's what I'm really saying, is that it's like if you're in a hall of mirrors and there's 3 doors, but it's going to be equally as difficult for different reasons to get out of the door. Correct. Somebody who's studying at University of New England or Charles Sturt University in Bathurst or Dubbo or La Trobe University in Bendigo or Deakin University in Warrnambool, they can have open to them a 189, a 190 and a 491 potentially. What they would be looking at is to segue from a 485 to a 491 because they're known in the community. They can get a job in the community. Whereas if you're studying in the capital city, Melbourne, for example, and you go and get a job in Warrnambool, it's like, who are you? We don't know you. Yeah. So there's so many different considerations. Migration is a very complex area of law, very, very complex, and it's ever changing too. Now, David, I know we've run through some examples before of specific people with ages and where they're from and whatnot. I think instead of running through those by word, by speaking,
Yeah.
how about I just put those examples on the website with the names removed?
That's a good idea. So people can look.
Because it is very confusing to actually put the points together. But
Gotcha.
I think the way that you've prepared this example or these examples
Mm.
help, and I think I'll add them to the earlier episodes that we've done too on those pages, because it really does step out the points and how, even though you think you might be okay,
You're not.
it's just too
You're
hard.
not. I did a talk at a uni the other day, early this week, Grant, and somebody said, so, I think I'm ready for permanent residency, a 189 application straight after school. I said, no, you're not. I said, I don't even know how old you are. I don't even know what you've done. I can tell you now you're not. People who are doing a bachelor's degree here, can't get 95 points. Impossible. You need to work here. You need to spend time here. You need to potentially partner up if it's a genuine relationship. The story is immigration is very, very hard. It's step by step. The longer you're in the system, the more you're exposed to change as well. That's the other thing. I mean, it's become so tight now that people who are studying or come to study might be the beneficiaries of some slackening, some lessening of the criteria, because it's very hard to migrate at the moment. 95 points for independent migration, impossible. I've had in this past year 2-3 people who've got 95. We have to find other ways.
Yeah. Okay, let's start wrapping up. I just wanted to go through some of the things that you need to bear in mind, that if your circumstances change from the time that you've graduated and put your application in, and it's an application for an expression of interest, and it's
not a visa application.
Leave that out.
Not a visa application.
For permanent visas, it's an expression of interest. But if something changes, you can update that online.
Always. If your age changes and you turn 25 and enter the 30-point category, it'll go up automatically. But if you do a 485 and you do a 485 with an English test of 6 or 7 in each band, and you do it, and it's got a life of 3, it's within 3 years of you lodging your application, that's okay. But if you do on your 485, 8 in each band or 79 plus in each band for IELTS test, update, because the department won't know, the computer won't know.
Yep.
So you've got to update your Australian work experience. You've got to update your credential community language. You might have tried the credential community language in the first year of your bachelor's degree, nailed it in the third, or nailed it in the first year of your 485.
Now, I want to
strike that reverse. I want to go back and clarify that. Yeah. If you're doing your credential community language, you do it after you've finished your bachelor's on your 485. Now, if you do it in the first year and you don't make it, but you do it in your second year and you make it, if you don't tell them, they won't know.
They won't know, yeah. Now, something I do want to clarify, when you've lodged your expression of interest,
because you've got 65 points minimum.
Yep, I think I use the term that it gives you a bridging visa. It doesn't.
No, it does not.
It doesn't.
It
just allows you to continue on your existing conditions until your expression of interest has been either granted or denied.
Your expression of interest lasts for 2 years in the system.
2 years.
It's you saying, Grant Williams, David Bongiorno, we want to migrate. We've got this score. Please consider us. That's what you're effectively doing. It's not a visa application. Your 485 has 18 or 24 months, and there's the processing time. If you are not eligible for another visa and your 485 is about to expire, you go home, you go offshore, you wait to be invited back if you have no opportunity for another visa.
So if you have not received word of the outcome of your expression of interest when your 485 expires, that doesn't mean that you will not get an invitation.
Does not, correct.
Means that
correct.
You can't stay here waiting for it.
A visa is a permission, a lawful right to reside in a country. If that right expires and you have not got an application in and a bridging visa, you're unlawful. What it means in practical terms, some of our clients go home and wait to be invited. in this COVID environment, do your best to stay here, though.
So I think that's clarified it. As you always say, David, it's a very complex area of administrative law in the country.
People make a lot of mistakes because the government says you can do it, and you can do it like tax, like a conveyance. But, if you're doing it yourself, you inherit the risk.
And the terms and conventions and whatnot are always subject to change. Now,
always.
There's a couple of other things that we need to point out is that if you get an invitation,
60 days. You've got 60 days to make an application.
To act upon it.
Absolutely. Now, there's no excuse for you not doing it the day after. If you are not in a position to do it a day after, you've done it wrong.
And by that, you mean in the strict terminology of legalese, that if you receive an invitation, you are expected that you can meet the requirements of the visa instantly. Correct. At that time.
Well, no, I make that clear with clients because otherwise they're not doing it properly. Because what you're doing is when you make the application, you're saying, I'm ready. I've got my Australian work experience calculated and proven. I've got my overseas work experience calculated and proven. I've got an IELTS test of 8 in each band, 79 in each band, done within 3 years of my 485 and expression of interest. And it'll be therefore valid for a 189 or a 190 or a 491. You're telling them you're ready. Now, if you're not ready because you've got to get money from overseas, that's fine. But if you're not ready because you've said you have 5 years of overseas work experience and you don't have it at the time of invitation, you get it, oh, yes, grant worked, and it's dated after, you're in big trouble. Because your time of invitation requirement.
And you know me, when it comes to government action and bureaucracy, I'm always glass half empty. And you might have 60 days to apply now, but who's to say that with the way things are now that they might say, oh, we've actually brought that down to 14 days.
Well, people should have no excuse unless they've got to get funds from overseas.
And that's the point you
make. In that hypothetical situation.
And if you do need funds from overseas, and you will be able to get them, there's usually a way to do interim finance and whatnot.
60 days. Look, the 60 days will remain. I mean, I think they've made immigration hard enough as it is.
I'm just saying don't tempt fate by not being ready. I think we've covered most things, haven't we, David? I
just want to touch on 4 things. The 485. Most of you listening, or nearly all of you listening, will have applied for and received your student visa after 5 November 2011. You have 2 years and about 3 or 4 months of processing, so 27, 28 months to get on the path of permanent residency. The expression of interest, very important to get right, very important to get right. If you make a mistake, do not. It's free. When things are free, people tend to pay less attention to them, pay maximum attention. The 189, nirvana, but very hard to get. Very hard to get.
And we have done a previous episode on satisfying the expression of interest, making sure you do get it right. So if you are about to do it, invest an hour and listen.
And the 189, very hard to get. And the 491, what you've got to think about with the 491, if you're a doctor, you're an engineer, you're a lawyer, you're a high-end IT person, you've got to make a decision between getting PR ultimately or developing your skills. Now, if you're fresh out of bachelor's or master's, you've got to keep your skills fresh and you've got to work in a dynamic environment. Is a 491 the right visa for you? You'll ultimately get PR if you satisfy the criteria, but you'll be out of the main game.
Yeah. So I think, David, we've covered the complicated world of getting permanent residence after you've done a challenging degree.
It's a challenging degree. And also challenging to get the 485 right. People fall with a police check. That's just apply for your Australian Federal Police check, have proof of apply. It's done electronically, so you'll have a record, a receipt. It's easy, but people forget.
So summing up, David, what are the other points that people must get right? The timeline?
Yeah, you can't apply too early. You can't apply too late. You've got to have English that's fresh. That is, at the time you apply for your 485, you'll have done your English within 3 years prior to application. You don't do it. If you don't do it in your second year of your master's or your final year of your bachelor's, you're crazy because it's an opportunity to get a higher score and it's a fresher test that can last you longer as you apply for expression of interest, as you express interest and apply for a 189 or 190 or 491. So do a test here. In your second year of your master's, do a test here. In your third year of your bachelor's, do a test here. You don't want to risk in applying for a 485 an old IELTS or PTE test that's out of date within 3 years. So if you've lost your IELTS, do another one. It's so important. You apply, say you apply 30 August or 29 August 2020, you have to have done the test within 3 years of that period. Make sense?
Yep, and I think we've covered that really clearly. Now, I've made the commitment that I'll put those examples on the website, on the page that goes with this episode, so people can step through it, and I'll make it as clear as I can, so that it's like the guide you need to have while you listen to the episode.
That's a points table. You're presenting a points table that is ready and easy to digest.
Yeah, and I think when you put the examples about who someone really is, how old they are, where they studied, where they work, it clicks it all into place. And then
yeah.
Now, David, people are always able to ask you questions, and the best way to do that,
if they want, they can. We've got on the website contact details, but I'm readily and very easy to contact on Twitter because I love Twitter. My Twitter handle, David, David, Bongiorno, Bongiorno.
Oh, look, it's up there on the screen, David.
Oh, there it is. Or we can have a chat, make a consultation time, and we can explain things. Very happy to do that.
And I've got there my Twitter handle. If you've got a suggestion about the podcast, the content or anything like that, direct that my way.
If you like us, tell us. If you don't like us, tell us. We're big boys. What did Bonnie? What was his name?
It's Bunny, or it's
Yeah.
Bonnie. No, it's Binny, wasn't it?
That's right. And he said we do too much on partner visas. Well, the reality is a partner visa is a legitimate and highly appropriate vehicle for somebody to migrate if they're in love or have a loving relationship with an Australian permanent resident or Australian citizen or eligible New Zealand resident. So it's a good one.
He also said we talk over each other, which we do. That's because we're excited. And
it's about passion.
And he also said that it's hard to listen to. Well, I'm sorry, we're Australian. And if you're not from Australia, it's going to be hard to listen because we speak Australian, mate.
Need some BBC English.
Yes. Now, Spotify, you can listen to us there. You can follow
Apple,
us.
Google Podcasts.
Yeah, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. We're on Podchaser is my new current favourite app. I'm going to put a list on the page. I'm going to write a little list because I've been playing around with a lot of the podcast apps just to see where we are and where people are listening to us. So I'll put the top 10 on the page and people can check them out. But of course, give us a review because we love feedback, and you can do the review now on the Migrating to Australia podcast page.
Word for the day, Grant, omnipresent. That's what we are. In the podcast world, we're here, there, and everywhere.
Sadly, we're not omnipotent as well. That would be good.
That's an even better word for the day.
David, I know people have been looking and listening to the Ashley Murphy episode.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent.
So anyone who's listening now who did listen to that one, let us know what you thought about us having someone professional from a different field talking about the impacts on immigration, because it was something different for us, and seems like people have been checking it out.
We like to vary the diet. Yeah, absolutely. Let us know.
Like more. Oh, Dave, that's great.
That was good. Have a good weekend, mate. Ciao.
Cheers,
See you, mate.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.